Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today we are working on our image editor, and today's topic is trying to improve object selection. So, this is our image editor. We have the ability to do lots of things. Let's actually start it up from scratch. The idea here is that we want to replace both GIMP and Paint at the same time. So, we want to be able to do everything that I would use GIMP for, as well as everything that I would use Paint for. So, example is we might want to make a drawing. We might want to put some stuff on here, right? So we have support for this. And what's interesting about our image editor is that like brushes here, each thing is actually just like a user-defined shader. So in this scenario, I can go in here and I go like, oh, let's change the parameters of this shader now, and that's kind of fun. We also have support for working with objects here, and we can like do something like let's cut out a picture of someone that creates like a mask. The mask object is just like application of a shader again. And we can like compose these things theoretically into like one big image. So we can be like, let's take that masked object here and let's take our beautiful drawing that we made, put that here. And we can do things like, resize, rotate, do whatever we want here. Now, the problem that we want to solve today is that if these two things are on top of each other, if I select this, sometimes it results in the thing underneath moving. And it's because like our hit testing is essentially just saying, where's my mouse? Which center object is closest to me? And I will move that. And that kind of sucks because sometimes the center isn't what you care about. You can especially imagine in a scenario where maybe we go back and we change this mask to kind of have something with like a high center of mass. Fuck, that's new. I've never seen that before. Yeah, I've never seen that one before. That's fun. But if we were to do something that has like a high center of mass, like maybe like this, right? Where you would expect the center to be is not clear. Actually, even worse, if we do this, and we cut out like the very top of her head or something, right? In the composition, how do we do this? We add masked object here. The center of her is actually down here, right? So let's actually do this in the other order. How do we do this? New composition. Let's add some background, then the masked object. So if I click directly on the center here, and like this thing is grabbed, and it's because the center of this object is actually down here, right? Because there's like this imaginary rectangle that we cut her out of, that like is not presented to the user in any way, shape, or form, right? So what we want to do is we want to find some way to reasonably determine what the user tried to click on. And so what I want to do is I want to basically render each of these components of the image and render them not as like the image themselves, but render them as like IDs associated with the object, right? Each object has like an ID to be shown in this list. Bannister, this is object 0. Cersei, object 1. This random AI generated field, image 2, right? So each of these things have an ID. And so if in our composition, we have like a mask that renders this as like 0, like this is like, you can imagine this thing like colored in where red is color 0. And then you could imagine this other thing here that's colored in like as a completely different color. I shouldn't use red and green because red green colorblind, but whatever. Then all we have to do is look at the like take our where our mouse is in like this general picture and be like, what color did I click on? If my mouse is here, I clicked on green. If I'm mouse here, I clicked on red, and then we know which object we are. I like that Cersei Bannister's last this long. Well, because we haven't actually made any pictures yet. It's just our one little joke has stayed forever. So that's the plan. We are going to try to find a way to render each object. Probably we have to take alpha into account as well, right? If I look at like our circle shader, this guy has the option of doing something like this, right? Where he has like kind of like low alpha in some cases, right? And so like trying to decide where this border is, we'll probably have to do some sort of like, if this thing is greater than 0.01 alpha or something, then we consider that clicked, otherwise not. I don't know, we'll see. So we'll render each object as a mask, figure out which one we clicked, use that. And that's kind of the whole plan. And hopefully it just kind of goes smoothly, but if not, that's the fun of coding. Okay, so the way our image editor works, it's been a minute since I've worked on this, so I will have to double check. But let's just make sure, first of all, that we're in a clean state. I wouldn't want to get this merged with something else. Let's make sure we're at the latest and greatest. Looks like we are, as long as we've pulled. Yep. So my recollection here is that object rendering is done by a renderer. Fancy, crazy, I know. And in here, we have like an object type might be a composition, and if it's a composition, we render all of these objects with their own specific transforms. So we probably want to, there's a couple ways we can do this. One, every single frame, we could render this hit test object. And we could just like store that somewhere. And we could, yeah, we could just like click it. Sure. And then when we click on something on the screen, we like sample that texture at the mouse location and ask, which object do we click on? Which is maybe reasonable. Another option is we could re-render that thing every time the composition changes. However, I believe that that's semi-non-trivial because the composition is like a collection of all of the things inside it. And so we'd have to like propagate any changes from any item to this like new composition. And I just don't think that we handle that really well. I think rendering this composition every frame is cheap. We do that right now anyways. So I think it's not the end of the world for us to just, when we render this composition, render this like mask thing as well. Now, who is going to query this thing? We have this like application class that kind of is just like the top level of everything. And I believe he has like an input state thing on here somewhere. And I think when we set mouse down, this is where this is probably relevant. Make composition input state. The fuck does this do? The fuck is this? Action. So we say on mouse down, could you perform some action? And presumably, set composition object transform is probably the thing. So each object is shown in the composition represented by some like 3x3 matrix of like where he lives. And I would assume that, yes. So here we're saying move this composition. Oh, because set mouse down and set mouse move are different things. Right. So on mouse down, we make some composition input state where presumably we find which object is closest to the mouse position here. And this is what's going to have to change. So let's just put a little like, fix me, use hit test object here. I believe, because like this is the code right now where he's saying, iterate over all the items in my composition, find their centers, and find my distance to them. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is just going to be like a complete rewrite. Now, how does this work? I guess right now, the composition object has a list of things that are just their object IDs and their transforms. Okay, and so I guess here we would also probably be like hit test, right? I think that's reasonable. Hit test texture. Maybe something like this, right? Maybe. And what happens then? I guess somewhere we have to update this thing. And I guess what probably makes sense is to just, I mean, we might not even have to do this actually. We might not even have to store this thing. Arguably, the only time we need this hit test is when somebody clicks on the composition, which is like a very rare event. And so if the latency of generating that hit test texture is low enough, that we can just do it within a mouse click. Maybe that's good enough. That seems reasonable, right? Because otherwise, say we have like 10 compositions in our thing. We don't want to update like this hit test tester for all 10 on every frame. That's silly. We could update the one for like the currently active object every frame. Maybe that's better because like you don't know if you're gonna like pipeline stall. Like theoretically, if this thing was expensive to generate, OpenGL, you'd be like, OpenGL, render into this texture, and then OpenGL, quick, what did you render? And typically that's not how it works. Typically you say like, OpenGL, render this stuff, and then you like go and do something else, and then like eventually it gets put on the screen, right? I think that's kind of like the expected behavior. So it would be nice if we could preserve that, but I don't really know if that's like trivial. Yeah, fuck it. Fuck it. I bet you that this thing is going to be cheap, and we can also make sure that we render this thing at really low resolution, and maybe we can actually only render the pixel. We could only render the pixel that we clicked on. That's definitely an option as well. So we say, render me a 1x1 pixel image wherever my mouse went down. So like in our case where we have like this thing, we have like object 1, object 2, right? And our like mouse is here. You could literally render like this pixel and be like, what object is right here? That would be kind of interesting. So let's kind of assume that's where we're going to end up. But obviously for debugging, rendering a single pixel will be kind of hard to like wrap your head around what's going on. So we'll start by rendering the whole thing. And I think we just won't store this thing here. I think we're literally just going to render the whole thing on mouse down. So for now, this like input state handler right now doesn't really know about like rendering, and it is somewhat silly for him to know about rendering, but maybe for now we'll just allow that. So I believe that we have this concept of a frame renderer. So I think that our renderer has like a shit ton of state associated with him. But then we go like, but for this frame, we're going to do a bunch of stuff. And for that, could you just like keep track of all this stuff? The idea here is that the renderer doesn't own any of these things, but he uses them to render. And he knows. Okay, let's look at this. Let's see. He knows that for each object, for his root level object, he's like, I'm a composition, so I will render this composition. Okay. And this composition will go through and he'll iterate over all of his objects and he'll just call render that thing. But I'm going to render this in this like other location. So what's a little interesting here is that like each object that is rendered has its own shader, right? Like, let's pull up a little bit of an example. Right, so like if I come up here and I say circle shader, right? This is actually like loading at runtime. Res shaders circle GSL. It's like opening this and running it, right? So we have to be faithful to that, and as our hit test thing has to run this shader. So I think what we have to do is we need to render this for each object, render that sub-object to some location, wherever it belongs in the composition, and then sample that texture. So I think we want to render each object to its own texture, sample that texture, and see if that texture has like a alpha value of greater than 1, and or greater than 0.01 or something, 0.1, whatever, some threshold. And if so, then copy that thing over. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Which means what? This frame renderer has all of the code that's necessary to like render things at the right spot, as well as render the thing at all. And does this like render object with transform? This is not exposed externally, but maybe it could be. Maybe it could be. So we say, hey, let's iterate over all of our composition objects. We could kind of like pull this loop out a little bit. And for each of these things, we call render object with transform chill. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. So I guess let's start by trying to just mask off a single input. I think that's probably the easiest way to get moving. Which means somewhere we have to do that. On mouse down. That was kind of the place that we thought we wanted to do it, right? So set mouse down. We said this guy's going to take in a frame renderer. He takes in a frame renderer, and that gets passed into find composition index. Who's getting like the mouse position? Mouse pause here. Okay. Let's just for now say if we're a composition, we will call something that's like maybe it makes sense for this to be like render hit test, render object IDs. Ooh, that feels kind of reasonable. That feels kind of reasonable. So we say, hey, frame renderer, could you render us a texture that has all the object IDs on it? Although we did say that we only want we want to render it with like the specific pixel where the mouse is at later. But for now, this is like okay. Fine. It's fine. Object ID text is this. And then maybe initially, our initial thing is going to be that we could write it to disk. I wonder if it's nicer for us to just show it as like an object in the object hierarchy. That might be kind of nice. That might be kind of nice. Like one of the inputs that we are allowed to have is like the composition indices. That might be kind of nice because then other like downstream objects could depend on that thing, and they could like say, let's look at this composition and take object 1 and 2 from this composition, but like exclude anything that's object 3, or make object 3 like more transparent. They could do whatever they want with any custom shader. That would be kind of cool. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I like that. So, kind of actually, huge pivot. We're going to make a new object type. And that object type is going to be the hit test object. And we can use that as our playground and then figure out the rest later. So here we're going to be like composition hit test. Okay. Seems reasonable. Or maybe we'll call this like composition IDs. Okay. So what do we call this? We call this composition ID object. Okay. So this is like composition ID object. And what are like our expectations here? He's gonna have a texture. And surely he's going to write down who he came from. So source ID is going to be composition. I guess object ID. Which image did this come from? And presumably, that's going to cause all sorts of problems. So yeah, everybody who right now does stuff is going to be like, I need to do stuff with that as well. So in the sidebar for UI stuff, we just ignore it for now. Okay, that's fine. What about here? When we save, we are gonna do nothing for now, but support save load of composition objects, of composition ID objects. That's fine for now. We come back. Why is he still mad? Oh, because this is supposed to return a save object. Fine. We'll just ignore it. What's happening here? Render object with transform. Okay, so this is the interesting work that we were trying to do. So right now we will kind of just do nothing. But in the future we will want to do something. What else is broken? Dependency iterator. What is this? So this is our way of testing if there are dependency loops. So if like object A depends on object B, which depends back on object A, we can never render that thing. So here we need to say if we are a composition IDs thing. I think that our dependency is the source ID. We depend on the composition, and that's it. Okay, sure. And I believe that that'll just kind of make everything work out. But we should probably put a fix me on here and say like make sure to test that this works. Okay, dimensions. Dimensions of the composition ID object is literally just going to be the same dimension as the composition. I think that we could maybe downscale this thing. It's likely that the hit test object could be lower resolution than source. So maybe we add some like a way to configure this. But for now, we just say, let's just use the source ID. So I think it's like return dims of C source ID. And the object list. I think it's actually just object list get this. So this is the source obj is this, and the source obj dot dims object list. There we go. Okay. Seems reasonable. Now here, this is on dinit. If we have composition IDs, right now we have no state to dinit, but we will actually. It's actually clear that that is necessary because we're allocating a texture, and that texture will have to be destroyed at some point. So this thing needs like a pub function dinit. And this is going to be like self, I guess. And we're going to be self texture dinit. Okay. And I guess alloc is not used for now, so this will go away. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. Chillin'. What else? And that compiles. Okay. So now we have to create this thing somewhere. So presumably somewhere we make a composition. Presumably. We could look for maybe callers of initialize on this thing. Or maybe we can just look for users of this thing. Add composition here. So presumably here, we just need to create a object of like name and IDs. So we'll say ID's name. Okay. Yep. Then this is going to be a composition ID object. And that means this thing needs a source ID of the ID of the thing we added just now. So I think that's like, we say self objects next ID. We say that the composition ID is this. And then this guy uses that thing. Boom. Simple. Simple, really. I think we kind of want this to look something like this, maybe. Yep, looks good. And then this thing will initially have an undefined texture. Or I think there's an invalid texture handle. So we can just kind of use that. And now when we create a new composition, if this thing will fucking compile. We should have like an object that we can click on when we add a composition that does nothing. So I'll say new composition. We have composition and composition IDs. They do have the same resolution here, and our object type is composition IDs, which means that he seems to be working. If I delete this guy, he says, hey, someone depends on me. Specifically, the composition IDs depends on me, so I can't delete me. But I can delete this, then I can delete this. Nice. Everything seems to be working. Hell yeah, dude. Okay. So now we have to actually do a thing, right? So for now, let's just go into the renderer and say, okay, what do we have here? We have C source, right? We have to do something with this. Presumably we need to, I think we need like to get the composition. So we'll call this like a, I don't know, data, I guess we'll call it. And we'll say the composition is data.source ID retrieved from our objects. So we'll get the object storage for this composition itself. Then we say composition data is, we need to extract the this is like a generic object. So this has like composition data, right? And this could be any of these things. Now we expect it to be this. If it's not, this is a fucking bug. So I think that we can just kind of dereference this thing. I think in Zig, if this is the wrong type, we will assert. So maybe we'll say composition obj here and composition data. Boom. I think that's fine. Okay. And then we want to iterate over each of these oh, geez, I just burped. Gross. We want to loop over all of these items like we did here. And we want to find their transforms for sure, right? But here, instead of just rendering that object directly, we want to render it to a texture that we can sample later, which we have the capability of doing. I think that we have this like render. Surely we do this somewhere else. Frame, buffer, render context. Render object texture. Oh, wait. We have that. Render object texture. Okay. So we just take that object and render it to a texture. And this will return us that texture. Okay. Composition object aspect. Looks like we probably need that. Okay. And then here we just need to do something that's like copy texture. We need to run render program that samples from text. Simple. Yeah, there's really nothing more to it than that. Run render program that samples from texture. So let's start by making one that will just render white if there is something there. Okay. Which means that we need some sort of like program for that. We'll call this a hit test program. No, it's a comp ID program. And we need to construct that thing somewhere. So comp ID program is a plain render program that initializes with this stuff, and we're just going to have our own custom shader here, fragment shader. So we'll call this like comp ID frag. Okay. So he is going to take in a image texture, which I believe is just like this. And I think that we just like say like boom, like if let's sample this thing at our UV coordinates, and it's literally just like alpha is this. And then we're like, if the alpha is greater than 1.0, fucking send it. Or sorry, 0.0. I guess we want like the color value is alpha is greater than 0.0 question mark 1.0 this 0. So if it's above 0, then it's 1, otherwise it's 0. Then here we go, color 1.0. Alpha is always full. Wait, is it? Maybe not. We might want this to also be this. Okay, so we have this like thing that we can render now. We have this comp ID program. We just need to store it. Okay, we need to dereference that or deinit that thing later. Okay, simple. And now when we're rendering now, we just call that thing? Oh, wait, hold on. We also need the ID program indices. So this is like a kind of hack, not hack, but like, so our program needs to know how to feed uniforms into the shader. And what we do is we kind of like compile time iterate over fields of an enum and say, okay, if this thing has an enum field, then he is something that we care about. So if I say like, what do we call it? We called it comp ID index or something. We can just kind of huck this thing here where we go like, we care about input image, right? So that will tell the like underlying system. That will tell the underlying system that this is a thing to look for. Which allows us when we call this program to be like, is there like another thing I can copy that's close? Yeah, something like this. So we have some program which is gonna be self renderer. What is this program called? We called it like ID comp ID program. A default buffer seems reasonable. We are rendering this thing with no user provided params. We don't give a fuck about user provided params, but we do have program provided params, which is what we were just talking about. So the program provided params come from our custom index. So it should just be able to be like ID, what do we call this? Comp, I already forgot. ID prog index. So we say, please put this thing here. In from enum, question mark, like this. And the value for that thing is going to be image, which is going to use this texture that we just rendered. Seems reasonable to me. And we are going to render this with the transform of the, like, put it in a specific spot. So we should be able to do it like that. And theoretically, I think that'll just kind of work. It would be cool if it worked. It probably won't in reality, but it would be cool if it did. So this thing actually wants this probably. He wants like the underlying texture ID. Okay, so if everything worked, I should be able to go in here. I should be able to add some picture somewhere, right? And like scale it down and stick it in the corner. That's close. That's really close. Really close to what I was hoping for. It looks like we've fucked up maybe like the dimensions. It's weird because like the bottom right corner seems like it's always going to the right spot. But like the height and width seem kind of fucked up, right? That's not good at all. All right. Fuck. Are we back? Everyone, are we here? Are we alive? Are we alive? We're almost there. Yeah? Yeah, let's go, baby. Yeah, we like crazy. But I think we are back. Okay, let's oh god damn it, dude. Twitch is gonna fucking run ads again because my stream crashed. Fuck off, dude. What a fucking piece of shit. You don't have to run ads again. You don't have to. You don't have to. Okay. Okay. So we must have done some sort of like mega GPU memory leak there. Oops. That's fucking annoying. So we have to be careful about that. We have to be careful about that. I hope we didn't lose too much in the recording. And I guess we need to bring up all of our stuff again. This thing? Hell yeah. Okay. Keep above others. Stick in the corner. This is a classic. This is a classic. All right. We are so back. We're so back. Thank you guys for sticking around. Sampled too hard. Yeah, exactly. Where the fuck is my activity feed? Here we go. All right. Let's pay close attention this time. And let's hope that we don't do that again. Because that is the worst thing to happen ever. Dude, I hate ooms. I hate ooms on Linux. They like just completely fuck you. They fuck you so bad. And I just want to, I just want it to be not that bad, I think we usually increase the font here. And let's try to figure out why the fuck that happened. Surely when we call render object to texture, this thing goes here. And probably we just have to like do this. We probably need to say after this thing, could you like free that texture, please? And I hope that fixes it. It would be nice to maybe be very careful about this and see if we can see like GPU memory leaking or maybe CPU memory leaking. So let's run this again and see if we see anything exploding. It looks like Radeon top doesn't. Oh, here we have like memory down here, VRAM down there. Okay, so new composition. Let's add a picture here. And I don't see memory exploding anywhere. I also felt it slowing down last time, so seems okay. Seems okay. I expect that the texture needed to be freed. So I think we're chilling. But we will keep an eye out for that happening again, because that would suck. Okay. So now the big question is why is the transform wrong? Why is the transform wrong? So new composition. We add a thing to that composition. It looks like we might be doing some like double aspect ratio application. It looks like this thing might have the same aspect ratio of this thing. I'm not sure. If I stretch this wide, does this thing get wider as well? He does. So he's definitely applying that transform in some way, shape, or form. If I rotate, what happens? He's staying attached to the bottom right corner. So that's kind of interesting. It's definitely interesting. I wonder if it's related to... I don't have a good answer. I do not have a good answer. I wonder if there's like... Render object to texture. This will create a texture that fills the screen. Okay, first, What if we just, instead of trying to sample this thing, what if we literally just write full white? Let's see if that changes the behavior at all. Let's just make sure that we put that on the right shader as well. Yeah, comp ID fragment shader. So let's see if we make the full thing white, if it's a problem with sampling if it's like a problem with like UV coordinate sampling, or a problem with the transform of the thing as a whole. Okay, so it looks to be a problem with sampling, right? Because now if we were adding Miss Bannister last time, or Miss Lannister. Aha! So it looks like it's a problem with UV sampling. So that's a good sign. That's a good and interesting sign. So what is happening there? Arguably, the UV coordinates are maybe getting a little bit distorted. I don't think they should, but that's a possibility. Another possibility is that the alpha is like wrong as well. Okay. Let's think for a second. Let's try making something with low alpha and seeing if that fixes or like how that affects the problem. Let's also try doing like putting this thing always show something. It'll show black on places where the thing doesn't exist and white on places where it does. Okay, let's try that. New composition, we add in this stuff. Okay, so that's a pretty good clue. That is a pretty good clue. Can we what happens if we were to look for instead of doing this, can we just sample like the red value? Like let's say, or even just sample the thing. Let's disable this thresholding thing. And can we actually just say, like, show the picture? Just show the picture. So new composition, our composition we add Bannister. Okay. That is interesting. That is interesting. So it's actually sampling the texture at the right spot, but it is only getting a portion of that thing. Right? So that seems like maybe some sort of like scissor bug or something. I bet you that's it. I bet you when we added our GUI framework, we added some scissoring stuff, and that's not getting like reset properly here. I bet we have to do like temp scissor equals friender temporary scissor. And I bet here we just want to do like set temp scissor set absolute to fill the texture that we're rendering to. No more scissoring, please. We could even maybe like full on disable it, but this is probably good enough. I bet you that's it. I bet you that's it. New composition. Add in Cersei. Much better. Okay, so now if we go back into our shader and we say, go back to doing whatever we were doing before. If alpha is greater than 0.0, we say 1.0, else 0.0. And this becomes a vec4 of color, 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 color. All right. Let's see what that does. Fuck. Shader compilation failed. What'd I get wrong here? Question mark probably? Probably forgot the question mark. Okay, so now we'd say, make me a composition, add in the Bannister, look at the IDs. Nice. And then we like scale this down and move it into the corner and rotate it. Oh yeah, come the fuck on. And so now we do something like we add a something that has like alpha application. So I think that maybe we do like a mask multiplier of like, maybe we take Cersei and maybe we draw uh or maybe we just like we mask her with a Slurpee. Sure, fuck it, that's good enough. And we add that to the composition. What happens now? Right, so here we are seeing some places where that like is showing through. I think the threshold is very low, right? So it makes sense that some of that stuff isn't there, right? So all of this probably has like a little bit of alpha. So it would be interesting if maybe we change the threshold here to like 0.3 or something. I wonder if we'll get something that's like a little bit more reasonable. So what do we do there? We add like a mask multiplication where we said like multiply Miss Lannister by a Slurpee. We added that to a composition. And then we looked at the IDs. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty sick. That is pretty sick. So we can kind of like position this however we want. And now yeah, that's pretty sick. That is pretty sick. So I think now what we want to do is we want to choose what we show there. Slurpee Lannister, yeah, exactly. We want to choose what color this is based off of the object ID. So I believe to do that, we need to set the texture that we are rendering to be an integer texture. And then we can set the uniform to say that the color of this thing will be that object ID. We'll just like put the object ID in like the red channel or something. And then we will have to sample that somehow. Yeah, so how do we do that? This render object to texture really assumes that like it wants to create the texture itself, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't just feed that in. So maybe we say render object to, I don't know, like provided texture. And this is just going to be like, here's my texture. Like this. And then we can kind of do whatever we want there. Okay. So that allows us to, wherever the fuck we're doing this thing, be like render object to provide a texture. Also, let's just throw fix me up here and just say like lots of duplication with composition. No more distracting animation on top of the camera. Well, just because it crashed. What is your tech stack? I mean, this project is just written with like raw OpenGL, pretty much. We're using Zig as our, language, but everything that we're doing here is just on top of OpenGL. GLFW for window init, including the GUI framework, which is kind of fun. We wrote our own GUI framework for shits and gigs. Partly because we wanted to say we have no dependencies. It's just kind of more fun that way. Okay, so here we need what? We need to create some texture. And that texture, we need to like say, please be an integer texture. So here, I think we can just go like here. Make texture of size. Here we need the composition object dimensions 0 and 1 for the X and Y. And it looks like we support multiple texture formats here. We should be able to just be like red I32 or something. We should, and that should map to some OpenGL type. I am human. This isn't even what I'm looking for. We're looking for GL text image 2D. Red bits. Are these like I think that these are floating point. I think I want something that's like integer. Yeah, here we go. R R32I or something sounds. Okay, we're looking for something that has only red and has like an I in here. So here we go. R32UI. R32I seems reasonable. Okay. And I assume that this is going into like their internal format here. Yeah. I'm pretty sure this was explained in the beginning of the image editor, but why are you using U31? I found it funny. Yeah, this has come up a few times because it's kind of fucking weird. But I use U31s because they fit in I32s, right? You can represent every U31 in a signed 32-bit integer. And so I want the type system to say, hey, this thing can't be a fucking negative number. Don't fucking use negative numbers here. But I would like to be able to do things like convert those into a signed integer, right? Because like if I have something that is, displayed like this thing has some width, but this coordinate is like off the screen, which means that this is going to be like some negative number. And so it would be just nice to be able to like add a negative number to a width without having to do a bunch of like integer casting, you know? So I use U31s. In Zig, those are just like, they will just be U32s, like, unless you pack them. So there's really no like real reason. There's no like technical difference, I guess. It's just like a type thing. Okay. This, what is like this format? Specifies the format of the pixel data that is passed in, I assume? And this doesn't matter because we're just not actually passing anything in. We're just making this texture as an output texture only. So this doesn't matter. This should be fine, which means that now I think that our output fragment shader, we should be able to specify the object ID in the red component. So we should be able to be like here, instead of out vec4 fragment, I think we need to change the output type. IVec4? What are like GLSL UVec4? I'm assuming is the name of this thing. That's interesting. I assume that, like you said, there's no difference in the generated assembly compared to U32. I assume the compiler just changed the runtime checks for under overflow compared to U32. No idea though. Interesting. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. There is a slight difference if you were to try to pack those things in like a packed struct or something, or a packed array. But I think for the vast majority of cases, it doesn't make a difference. So I think that I can just be like, let's throw out a UVec4 here. And then instead of color here, we want to take in the object ID as a, I don't know, like U32 probably. I don't really know what like their data types are, like unsigned int, probably in GLSL. There's IVEC-N, but in this case, I guess we should use int so we only have one channel, question mark. Yeah, I guess so, huh? I don't really know how the pipelining works. Like GLSL out int. Like, is that allowed? Like GLSL fragment shader output. Fuck, I don't want to do shopping. I guess we can just do, I mean, we can just try it, I guess. And so I guess we, if we're doing it this way, have to discard. We can't just write out a 0 now. We actually have to say, no, fuck off. So I guess we'll say like, if alpha is less than 0.3, discard. Then we just say that our fragment is object ID here. I think that's what we want. Seems reasonable. So that means that we need object ID here as one of the things that our shader is going to work with. And then we will pass in the object ID here as a something. This is taking in resolved uniform values. Unsigned version is called uint. Oh, thank you. That would have bit me. I guess then we want an unsigned int here, and that means that like whoever uses this thing needs to know how to handle those. Which means that we need to go into friender zig 43. Nope, wrong one. Who's trying to use him? Oh, these come from these uniform types. Sure. Right, everybody has the same shenanigans. Oopsies. Which means that GL int unsigned int probably. Okay, and then I assume that there's just gonna be a bunch of people that get pissed here. So 372. This is okay. This stuff gets passed on, I assume. Who else? This expected 2 arguments, so this needs to be passed in the texture here that we're trying to render to. Okay. This thing is mad because this is where are we? We are in our renderer finding the default parameters for things. Okay, so now that we support uints here, we do uint get integer get uniform IV, I assume is used for unsigned integers as well. Get uniform UIV actually. Okay. Seems reasonable. Default should be a GL uint. Okay. This thing is mad because this switch and resolve uniforms is not correctly propagating things around. So we just say, please propagate that thing for me. Thank you very much, sir. This switch has to handle all possibilities. So this is again an application of this thing. So this should probably be like GL uniform something. I assume that the I just turns into a UI. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This thing is mad because we just, where is this? This is in our application. If somebody is trying to change the value of a floating point thing, uint doesn't do anything. Okay, and I presume everything else is fine. All right. So in our renderer now, we should be able to say, when I upload that thing, please set this thing to a uint of the object ID, which is what? I don't fucking know. Composition object.id, probably. We have it up there. Composition object ID value, probably. Composition object. This is a U size, so we probably have to endcast this. Okay. Now, what's this gonna do? Who knows? Who knows? We're probably hoping to see like black. Oh right, you told me to say uint instead of unsigned int. All right, you said to do this. Okay, so now what do we expect to happen? If everything is working as expected, we should see an almost black blob that outlines whatever we put in the composition. So here we're like, let's add this thing, and we'll kind of put it here. That's not good. That is not good at all. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So very weirdly, we're seeing like green and blue come out of this. Oh, but the thing we're sampling, I think that we might have to say that we're sampling. Oh, we're sampling. How does this fucking thing work again? Comp ID program. is rendering this thing with this input image and this object ID. And this is just getting put out into this texture. No, this is, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. We actually do not want to render, when we're rendering this object to this texture, this is wrong. This is wrong, because this is not our program yet. We want to render our program to this texture. So this is just still render object to texture. And then we want to make our thing, and we want to render that to a texture. Aha. Aha, aha, aha. Okay. So we like construct a render context here, which is literally all of this stuff. This is going to get copy pasted somewhere else for sure. So we should probably say like, I don't know. We'll figure this out later. We'll just put like a fix me. This is definitely duplicated with other stuff. So we're gonna render this thing to some integer texture. That's like kind of like our new thing that we're doing. Okay. And this is our like output texture. Okay. And this is the thing that we want it to be, like a integer texture like this. Okay. Then we are here and we're using composition object dims 0 and 1 and here as well. We render that texture. Then after that, we literally just render again. We render again. So we've rendered object IDs to a texture. Then we want to sample that texture and put that on the screen. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We don't care about this. I really don't give a fuck. So now if everything is working, we would expect to see garbage. That's not good. So he's real pissed. He didn't like that. He really didn't like that. He says it's an incomplete frame buffer. That's interesting. Okay, we gotta figure out where that's coming from. Oh, you need to use sampler 2D? That's a pretty good point. Although, that doesn't really explain why the frame buffer is broken. I don't think. Let's like kind of bisect this problem a little bit. So let's skip the final render. We'll skip the final. The final render does jack shit. Okay. New composition. So far nothing happens. We add one thing to this thing, and yeah, he starts freaking the fuck out. So he thinks that the color attachment is incomplete. GL text image 2D, integer, non-integer format mismatch. Okay, so that explains this. It does not explain the GL clear problem. Maybe GL clear has to be Is there like a integer color clear? Or maybe on frame buffer initialization where you're supposed to say something specific. Maybe here we are supposed to say that the attachment is like some sort of like integer attachment. That seems possible. Seems possible for sure. So this guy, we have texture 2D. That seems fine. Let's make sure that we are using, okay, output texture here. Okay. So I wanted to double check if we are still in the broken state, right? If I add something to the composition. Yeah. Okay. So, color attachment incomplete. No attachments, and default width or height is 0. The fuck? So can we here check? Oh, we do. So if this is working, what's the problem? Right? If this is working, if this check was working, we would be like crashing, right? Which would be no good. So I just want to double check, like, let's comment out all of this stuff. Right? Commenting out all of that, do we still get spammed with bugs? Spam with errors, I mean. New composition, we add this, we go here. Interesting, that is still crashing. Not crashing, just like complaining about an incomplete frame buffer. So it must be this itself is causing the problem. Add, go here. Even there, invalid operation. Integer, non-integer format mismatch in GL generate map. Maybe. Oh, hold on. I think I understand. I think here, if we say, hey, I want my storage format to be integer, but I'm sampling this thing from somewhere else, he probably gets upset about that. So I think we just have to use the same storage format here as well. And then does that kind of stop the log spam? Oh, wait, this is wrong. This, this is a different thing. Okay, hold on. Let's go to GL text image 2D again. And format specifies the format of the pixels data. So here, if this thing is an integer, I think that this also has to be an integer. So we can just say like const pixel or like format is going to be switch storage format. If it's i32, we do red integer, maybe. Else RGBA like we were doing before. We use format here. Let's see what that does. Fuck. Let's see if that stops the spam. So we add a composition. We say new thing in there. We click here. Invalid internal format on generate map. But I don't think that we really need bitmaps. I think we're just kind of doing that because we saw it somewhere and we never took it out. I don't think that we're using like bitmap levels anywhere. So I think that that should also just be fine to remove. We will have to check that later, but for now, we will just try doing this. All right, nobody's fucking yelling at us anymore. Big win. Big win, which means that we should be able to do this stuff again without many problems. Let's see. Let's see. Uncomment everything. Uncomment the world. And new composition. We add a thing and we click on this. Okay, so now we just seeing like literally nothing of value, but at least nobody's screaming. No one's screaming. Okay. So now what? Now what? Let's set the object ID to a really, really big number. Just like, just to see what happens. So instead of setting it to like 0, we need another program actually. Hold on. So we need somebody who samples from this thing and shows as well. Right, we are rendering out to some integer texture, and we are then trying to sample from that integer texture with our like default program, which is no good. So we need yet another program. We'll say display ID program IDX. And this is going to look much more like a typical program. So he's going to take some sort of, he's going to output a vec4 again, like normal. He's going to have some sort of image input, but this time it's going to be a U sampler 2D, I think. We're sampling from some sort of U sampler. Yep. Maybe it's iSampler in this world actually. Yeah, because technically the format is signed 32-bit, even though we output is unsigned. I don't know if it really matters. We'll see. And when we use a U sampler, I don't really know what it does, but we can dream that maybe this thing comes out as like a uint. We probably want like uint obj ID. Seems reasonable. And we'll just say if obj ID is greater than 0, I guess we want like a specific object ID. So let's say if the object ID is not equal to 1, we discard for now. And if it is equal to 1, then we can output the color. Right, we're just going to use this as like a little bit of a test bed. Which means that we actually need like yet another program, I think. Display ID program. Which is going to be the same as this. But he's going to use our display. I guess we should call this display ID frag. So this can say frag. And here we use display ID index, okay. And then here we say display ID program is display ID prog, boom, boom, boom. And then down here, wherever the fuck we were, we say self renderer display ID program, display ID prog. Okay. That's like a maybe. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here that we could have fucked up, so we are gonna have to be a little bit careful, but what is this pissed about? Oh, I see. This error defer was compiled out before because there was nothing after it that could have failed. It's kind of funny. All right. Fuck. Shader compilation failed. Why? Object ID used uninitialized. Invalid swizzle mask U. Okay, what is happening here? Yeah, this should obviously not be a U. This should be an R. And then, do I have to use a different thing to, like, sample from a U sampler? Maybe we say U texture? Maybe? Maybe? You never know. No functional name U texture. Okay, so sample from U sampler. Interesting. Can we ask, like, this is too many words. How do I sample from a U sampler in GLSL? Can I use texture? Question mark. Okay. Is a UVec4? That's what I thought. But he doesn't seem to like this. So what is he saying? So first of all, he doesn't like obj ID use uninitialized. Let's try this again without the U from texture because that didn't exist. So now he's just pissed off about this. So how come obj ID? Like if I do this, does it fix itself? Say I will cast you to a uint manually. Thank you very much. He seems okay with that. And then we have to make sure that the object ID that we're using when we generate this thing, let's just force this to be 1 for now. Because that's what we're expecting in our shader. Later, we will play with the idea of selecting which object that we're trying to test. But for now, we want to just show anything at all. So here we go. Boom, 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 boom. This is showing nothing, which means that it's not doing what we want. It's not doing what we want. Lame. Lame, lame, lame. So can we do something else? Like, let's just start here. Let's just like fucking make the screen white for a second. Let's just see what that does. New composition. Interesting. Okay. So that's definitely getting run. I don't really like the fact that he's... Oh, right, because we're sampling from the output texture. Right, okay, that makes sense. So, if we sample from this output texture, let's try reducing the amount of things that could go wrong here. So, when we output here, let's just unconditionally, for now, output some big number, right? Like 2 to the power of 31, right? Something real big. Then, can we just, when we sample from this thing, does he convert this to a float or something? He might. So let's see what happens if we just like huck that shit in there. He's pissed because int cannot be assigned to type of uint. What's he pissed about? Can we just put output as integer? Does that make our lives easier? It might. He's pissed because int cannot be assigned to type of... Oh my god. Maybe here? Okay, he seems okay there, which means that I'm pretty sure I've got the types wrong here again, actually. Yeah, so now he's just unconditionally outputting 0, which makes sense. So if I type like float here, well, I guess we need to read some docs. Texture GLSL. Okay, so if I take in G, what is G sampler here? Does it say what like my return is? GVec4. So I assume that G matches G here, right? So if we said like vec4 here, I'm assuming that that's gonna get mad. That's I would assume. I would assume. Yeah. Too many parameters. But if I wrote ivec4 here, oh no, I see. If I write r here, what happens? Oh, he actually seems to be okay with that, which is interesting. It's pretty interesting. So I just want to make sure that we have like everything consistent here. Let's work with int 32s everywhere. Int 32s. Fuck uints. So we create a texture with ri32. Right? So this should be an internal format of gl32i, which I believe we thought would be okay. Right? We read this list of internal formats that are allowed, and we picked R32i. R32i. Okay. And then he's not yelling at us. We use red integer as the input type, but the input type doesn't matter because we're not actually pulling any input when we make this thing. Okay. So we have some sort of integer texture at output texture. Then we run our comp ID program with some like scissors and stuff, whatever, doesn't fucking matter. We clear with 0. So if we clear with color 1 here, I want to see if that changes anything. Let's like ignoring anything that could go wrong in our shader. If we just stick out the color red, do we fucking see the color red? That's the question. Okay. That's definitely interesting. Can we like just oops. The clear has to come after the viewport setting. Obviously. Obviously. Let's try that again. Okay, so we say new composition, we add a thing, we click here. Okay. So that's definitely interesting. It means that when we run this comp ID program, we are doing something. Okay. So this comp ID program, we ran, hey, output 1 to the power of 31 everywhere. Sorry, 2 to the power of 31 everywhere. Which does not seem to be doing what we would expect here. Because it is turning black in that area. How do we make it not black? That's the question. So here we sample from this texture and we say, can we look at I am hoping that the value that we get here when we try to display this thing, when we sample that integer texture, I'm hoping that the value is the same as the value that we put in. So can we just say like obj id.r is less than 500? I guess we want like color is equal to, if this is less than 500, 0, else 1.0. Let's just start there. I don't know, and just kind of see what happens. New composition. We add a thing. We look here. Still fully black in there, which is not good. Also kind of interesting the fact that it's like seems to be like weirdly partitioned in some way, but we can kind of ignore that for now. The interesting part here is that even though we think we were sampling from an integer sampler, when we call texture on this thing, we are not getting something that matches what we thought we output. Right? Um, what happens? Okay, when we look at like the casting rules here, what happens? Like, let's just double check. So we take this output texture, we bind him as our frame buffer output, and we run our program. Our program says, please use this guy. How does he actually bind him under the hood? He looks at these like reserved uniforms and he applies uniform at location. Looking at the image thing, he calls active texture and bind texture. So GL bind texture, 131 says the highest bit. Do we not want 130? Ooh, that's a very good point, huh? That does seem kind of promising, huh? I just assumed, but you are right. That does seem kind of likely to be a culprit. Oh, that is so much better. Thank you. That is huge. That's actually so big. Okay, so we default clear everything to 0 now. Oh, that's actually massive. Okay, so we add the composition. Click this. Now we are back to the scaling being wrong, but at the very least, we have like a red blob. That is so big for us. So now the question is where is that blob coming from? But we can deal with that. Eventually. I believe it's this. Somewhere like next, I think here when we render this thing, we want to render identity transform here. So we are creating, let's think. We are, oh no, this thing is like this, and then this is identity. No, this actually seems right to me. Okay, let's go back though. Before we get there, let's output the object ID again. Okay. And I assume that this will bitcast. And can we check here if the object ID equals 1? Then we will output 1, otherwise we output 0. We want that to show full red. Fuck. Right. Okay, because this thing input is an uint. Wait, let's go back here. I assume that if I do an output of uint here, it'll autocast to the right thing under the hood. So can we do that? Both here and here. And see if we get the same behavior. Let's do some more uint in GLSL side. Fuck. Does this need to be uint here? Is that where it's complaining? Oh, and then probably this needs to be a uvec4. Let's see. Fuck. Condition must be scalar or boolean. At line 8. Am I fucking stupid? I don't see the problem. I don't see the problem. Let's do this again. Like, make sure that that compiles. Because it should. Yeah, that's totally fine. And then if we go in here and we add a thing, we look here, we still see the red blobs. That's good. Now, why does changing this from an I to a U cause problems? Oh. We want to change this to U as well. Unsigned types. So here, oh, could not implicitly convert operands to a relational operator. Could not implicitly convert operands to... Oh, is it because this thing is a signed integer, and so we need to say that this 500 is also unsigned? Maybe the default integer type in GLSL is signed. Aha, that's it. Okay, so now we are hoping to see the same kind of red blob. Nice. Everything is still the same as it was before. Huge. Okay, so now let's assign this to be the object ID. Or let's check for exact equals to the thing that we put in on the other side. We're expecting this to be exactly 1 shifted left by 30. So if that's the case, we should still see the same red box, but we're getting much closer to like actually working with object IDs under the hood, which is huge. There's no I in team CU problem. Perfect. Okay, sick. Sick. Okay, so now if we were to assign the object ID that we passed in here, we assign the input object ID. And that is passed in here as the number 1. So since that's the number 1, we should no longer see that red box. It should be totally black, is what I expect to see if everything is behaving the way I expect it to. So here we add a thing, we click here, everything's black, huge. And then we go back down here and we say, instead of comparing with this value, can you compare with the value of 1? And if everything's good, we should see the red box come back. And then that means that we have a mask with the specified object ID, which is super big for us. Huge. Huge. Okay. So now all we have to do is change this to be like object. Where is this thing's ID? Composition object ID value. Huge. Int cast. And then down here, we'll just say if it's greater than 0. Okay. New composition. We add our composition. We click it. Fuck. So why is that different? That's really interesting. So let's put this back to 1. Is it because one of the object IDs is 0? Is it because one of the object IDs is 0? That's kind of funny. It might be. So we actually might need to do this plus 1. Because object ID 0 is a total valid ID. So let's try this again. So we say new composition, add this thing, and we'll put them left and right here. Aha, interesting. Interesting. That's super interesting. So we delete banister, and what if we add like Cersei twice here? I think we're overwriting. I think we lost our discard on here. Yeah. We maybe it's because we're clearing on each iteration. Yeah, so we actually want our output texture to be initialized way the fuck up here before we start iterating objects. And we actually want to like set up our render context all the way up there as well. So we set up our render context here. Then all of this stuff happens indented. Okay. This doesn't have to be indented anymore. This is like this. We render each object individually to that texture, and then at the end, after that, we render the texture like this. By the way, Google says if you want to clear an integer buffer, you need to use glclear buffer. Maybe the value works 0 works by accident. I think that I saw somewhere at some point that there's like some sort of auto conversion that happens, but you're probably right that it is probably safer to do it that way. Oh, that's not good. I think it's because I free the texture before this, so this texture actually has to be done here. I'm losing the output texture. Okay. Let's try that again. So new composition, add the thing, Go here. Oh, fuck, we lost it. We lost it. What have I done wrong now? It's interesting that it's going like... Hold on. What did we lose? I just shuffled some stuff around. So what did we said? Use this object ID. Display ID fragment shader. This is the last thing that's drawn. He says sample from this input image. The fact that this thing is anything but fully visible seems like a problem to me. Like, because our input image is a red texture only. So that, like, we're only sampling this thing as red texture, and there's nowhere we're doing anything that isn't alpha 1.0. So it should be fully black or red. The fact that we're seeing anything other than those two things is like very concerning to me. Right? Like, in a new composition, we go here. Like, why is this anything but... Like, this is transparent. That shouldn't be transparent. There's a... We've definitely fucked something up here. Oh, it's that this is in the wrong spot. One brace too far. That would do it. He was rendering into the same render context, not to the screen like he was supposed to. All right, let's try it again. New composition. Okay, fully black. Nice. We add a thing. Okay. There's definitely something interesting happening here. You can definitely see, I think that I'm seeing a stretched version of Cersei Lannister. I think this is her arm in this pose. So it's like not applying the right transform and getting stretched funny. Because this is using the wrong transform, I think. I think this is supposed to be composed to composition. I think. Then this is still a little concerning. This is probably supposed to... We'll see. We will see. Okay, so we create a composition. We add a banister. We come down here, it's full red. That's not good. Oops, deleted the wrong thing. Let's add a composition again. So this thing's full black. We add a thing. It goes full red. Kind of no matter what. Okay. Let's go back to trying to specify a very specific object ID. Just to see if it's... So in this case, we should see... I'm not sure, actually. I don't know what I expect to see here. So fully black, add a thing, fully black still. Even though the color here, I'm checking if it's exactly the color that we set here, which indicates that this is wrong. Which indicates that something about this is not right. So let's... I mean, it's hard to see. Thinking. So we need to make sure that all of our memory stays valid. We have this output texture here. He stays valid all the way to the end of this block. So he should be fine for this render here. We initialize him here with our integer texture. Good. And then we call clear all the way down here. Let's just confirm here that if we were to set him to full red, I assume that we should see full red again. Just kind of unconditionally. But we're not. Why the fuck not? That's interesting. Unless this stuff is overwriting. Fuck. Can we do like a... just comment out this render, I guess, maybe? I just want to see like a fully red picture. That will make me at least confident that we have something sampling the texture correctly. I guess this GL clear color might also not be doing what I expect. Also, we should double check that our shader at the end. Oh yeah. Oops. This is still checking for exactly one. Okay, new composition, boom, full red, huge. And then if I set this to black, we should see it not red at all. New composition, black. Okay, good. Okay, so now this guy is going to actually supposedly sample from this texture, run our like object ID sampler program or whatever, and output something. New composition. So here we add a thing. Go here. We're getting something that, again, resembles Cersei Lannister in some way, interestingly, and fills the screen red. Now, what's concerning about this is that shouldn't be happening, right? Because this fragment shader is always outputting 1. So it looks to me like we are accidentally rendering the wrong thing here. That's the only thing that could be happening, is we're accidentally rendering Cersei Lannister again into our display ID program. That's the only thing that makes sense. Which means that this input image here is getting the wrong texture. Or this render program is doing something stupid as well. That's another option. So if we double check, we disable this render here that's supposed to render to the ID texture. If we do that, does it still show up? New composition, we add Cersei, and we go to here. It does, right? So in this world, theoretically, we've done nothing. Right? Theoretically, we've done like literally nothing. It's probably the fact that we're calling this render object to texture. My best guess here is that this is not correctly preserving whatever state's going on here. And so then we are somehow accidentally rendering to this output texture when we shouldn't be. That seems likely. And is it because our frame buffer render context? He's supposed to keep track. So he says, okay, this is the frame buffer that we got on start. Prev FBO. And on reset, I want to use that previous one. Okay, so that seems pretty reasonable. I'm not binding this frame buffer. Which seems important. This init, I don't think is actually doing the binding. He does the bind how here. But maybe down here when we render here, we have to rebind it. So here we render to some texture, theoretically. Then here we're supposed to render back to our texture from that texture. So there could be some fucking binding shit that's not being quite handled correctly. Let's see what happens if we do that. Still the same shit. Still the same shit. Bind frame buffer with this new FBO. On reset, we go back to the previous one and we delete ourselves. Seems reasonable. I'm okay. I guess we can assume that if I comment this out, that we'll go back to seeing either full black or full red, probably full black. Unless we're doing something really fucking stupid. Full black, yeah. So it's literally this call that tries to render the object to a texture that's a problem. Okay. I wonder if it's like... I really am not seeing it, dude. I'm really not seeing it. Because as far as I understand, this call should have zero effect on like external state. The only thing that makes sense here is that somehow he's reusing the same output texture ID. So we give like output text ID is this. And could we be like object texture ID is from here. If there's some sort of like accidental recycling of IDs by mistake, are you binding a new frame buffer? I should be. As far as I understand, I am. But I mean, it's very possible that we made the mistake there somewhere. So we have, these are different. Is it supposed to just like cycle texture numbers like that, by the way? I hope so. I hope that doesn't like indicate like some sort of like expensive leakies. Okay. Render object to texture. The first thing he does is he initializes a render context. This thing should bind the frame buffer. Nowhere does he unbind him. As far as I can tell, I do not see any unbinding of the frame buffer. The only cases where this is called is on reset, where we rebind the previous FBO. Okay. So we say bind this thing, reset, and then we render this object, which is a file system object. All he does is he calls render program render. Right? So there's no frame buffer shenanigans happening here. Right? And then so that should be fine. Should be. And in fact, we can probably check that if what? Hold on, I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm not sure. It seems like it's checkable. If we were to render this texture using this, that seems like how you do it. But this texture is like gone at that point. Because we de-init this texture like within this loop. Very interesting. I mean, the biggest clue here is that texture data is leaking, right? So like, what if we just kind of like put the amount of red here directly into the displayed texture ID, or into the displayed output. New composition, add Cersei. Are we using like the wrong program? Display ID program, render this input image. Display ID program comes from display ID frag, of course. So we take some sort of sampled texture, we sample its red, then we spit that shit out. Nothing crazy there at all. Nothing crazy there at all. So why the fuck are we seeing parts of Cersei Lannister in there, right? We know that if we comment this out, I think, I'm just going to confirm that one more time, which should have no effect on anything, right? We believe that there's no effect on anything there. Behavior is totally different. Totally different. Oh, so something is leaking where it's not supposed to go. So the problem has to be down here. It has to be. I'm just not seeing how. We error defer texture, render context reset unconditionally, temporary viewport reset unconditionally, scissor reset unconditionally. Set viewport, set absolute, yeah, nothing crazy. Then we render an object transform, and again, we saw here that this is literally just calling this. I'm really not seeing it. I'm really not seeing it. Okay, what if, hear me out, we take away all of this stuff. We take away everything about like render context setup. Fuck this output texture. Fuck everything. Fuck this display ID program at the end. Literally, we are not going to do anything but try to render a child here. That's all we're going to try to do. And if something is leaking that shouldn't, we will see that on the screen. We will see something on the screen. Which we are not, right? This is kind of my expected behavior here. Is that we see jack shit. So why is it that as soon as I bring all of this stuff into the picture, is it a problem? Okay. I wonder if we can gain some insight by doing something else. I'm trying to think of what. Display ID program. Is it possible that this? Oh, what if we're not binding the right thing? Hold on. Hold on. What if this texture application is not happening? Because like we did something stupid here, right? Say we think we're sampling from one texture, but we're actually sampling from another texture. That seems possible to me. And so whatever the final thing happens to be rendering is just not, it's just not our texture. That seems kind of possible. It definitely seems possible. If, to assign a use sampler, if we had to call a different call, maybe in render here we are using GL bind texture. Is it possible? Oh, I mean, this seems quite kind of right. How can we? No, I mean, we're pretty confident though that like, say at the very end of this, at the end of everything, I'm just like, clear this thing to full red. Let's see what that looks like. Because if we clear to full red at the end, we should see full red, right? That's kind of a reasonable assumption. Which we're not. We're not. Which indicates that we're using the wrong fucking texture ID. That's definitely what this indicates. Right? Because if we were to do this, comment all of this out, so that we only just bind the like integer texture that we're trying to render to, we clear it black, we clear it red. We should see red at the end there. Did you read your thing about clearing integer textures? I did see that, yeah. I just didn't think that that should be the problem. Okay. So that works fine, right? This works fine. It's as soon as we try to bind any other texture as part of our process, we just must be not clearing some state that we're supposed to be clearing, right? Specifically in here. Specifically in here, one of these resets must just not be working, right? Oh, your updated thing. I might not have seen the updated one. I did the 3.3 set spec says the result of clearing intra-color buffers is undefined. I see. So maybe I'm relying on undefined behavior. That's possible, but it just seems like so much more likely to me that when we render to this texture under the hood, that we're doing the wrong thing. Because like this clear at the end saying, please clear the currently bound frame buffer is not having the intended effect. So I wonder if I say like render context.bind here first, if that changes behavior. Because it could. English with a bit of Canadian, I think. Yeah, we're zig/GLSL depending on which part you're looking at. Okay, so let's add her. Go here. Still no good. It's like our frame buffer at this point is like totally fucked. Like dead almost. That's how it feels. Like this render context feels like it's just going away. So it might be interesting to try to log calls to GL bind frame buffer. Binding this. Okay. Binding this. And then binding, this is not prev, this is just current. And here we do a bind frame buffer here of FBO. Let's see if any of these guys, maybe we should say where in init. In bind. And in reset. Let's see if any of those guys are kind of doing an unexpected thing. So we go new composition, add Cersei, and we go to composition ID. Okay, so let's read this. It might be nice to like kind of segment where we are. Relevant rendering. Defer rendering, relevant rendering complete. Let's see fucking anything, man. I just don't understand. I do not understand. But we will get there. We will get there. New composition. We add Miss Lannister. We hit this. Okay. So we are seeing in this section, we start a new frame buffer. We initialize and bind 560. We bind 561. We reset back to 560, which makes sense, right? So 561 is like when we're rendering the texture of the object itself. Then we bind 560 back, which seems reasonable. So like, what's the problem? Like, what? Why? If this is the case, how come we're seeing stuff that was rendered in 561 leak into the texture bound in 560? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Especially the fact here, where at the very end, this like clear is not applying to this output texture, which it should be. I guess a possible problem is if GL frame buffer texture 2D is being called from somewhere it shouldn't be, and like somehow we're attaching the wrong texture. But as far as I can tell, it's called in like just this literally one spot. This is the only place. What is this 0 at the end? Level. Yeah, okay, so that seems fine. Target, attachment, text target. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So I will say it is, this undefined behavior thing is a little scary. So I think that you're probably right that it is worth trying to do the correct version of clear color, right? Let's start there. So we'll go back to the case where we think this should work. And let's just clear our texture as, I assume we want to do something like GL clear buffer IV, right? We want to clear it with 4 I32s, I assume, at like something like this. I assume. What is draw buffer here? What is draw buffer here? What is this GL clear buffer? What is draw buffer? A particular draw buffer to clear? Okay. Oh, is this like color attachment 0? If buffer is GL color, a particular draw buffer GL draw buffer I is specified by pressing I as draw buffer. Yeah, so I'm assuming this is like which color buffer we're on, which is 0. So I think this should be what we want. And so if this works, then we should expect to see a big red blob on the screen. I suspect. So we go here, we go new composition, we go here, it's red. Okay, and then just for sanity, let's try to make it like kind of like mid-red. So maybe like shift it left by 15 instead of 30, and we should see it be a little bit less bright. So we go new composition. It's hard to tell. Can we shift it left by like 2? You know, make it like really dark. New composition. Interesting. Oh, because in our sampler, we're literally just checking if he's greater than 0. Sure. So can we check if, oh no, we're just taking him directly. But we're probably taking him in like integer space, so we probably want to do like divided by 1 to the power of 30 or something. Probably. Because he's probably doing like float casting, which is just saying everything above 1 is always 1. It's probably doing something stupid like that. That's black. Okay, and then do we need to convert this to a float first as well to do like floating point math? And then here, can we do this like 1 to the power of 50 or 2 to the power of 15? The thing about 1 to integer textures is like 1 is really 1, which is what we wanted, to be fair. Things are just kind of getting out of hand. So we're trying to debug using floating point textures, which makes things a pain in the ass. So that's full red. If we shift left by, 28 or 29 instead of 30, that should be like 28 shift instead of 30 shift should be like 1/4 of the color. So new composition, boom. Okay, there we go. So I think that we can be fairly confident that this clear buffer IV is clearing this thing somewhat expectedly, right? We're getting a somewhat expected value out of him. Now let's go back to bringing back in this Cersei Lannister rendering, which is supposed to be going to a completely different spot, right? Completely different. Because at this point in our lives, we should be seeing that we are rendering to this frame buffer, and at this point in our lives, we should be rendering to a different frame buffer. So we should just see the exact same shit. Literally nothing changed. We should just see this like kind of like weird dark reddish shit. Boom, boom. No, okay, then we add Miss Lannister in. What the fuck? Right? It's clear that we're doing something fucking stupid. I just don't know where it is. I just don't know what it is. Right? We're fairly confident that it's this thing, right? Or at least the combination of like yeah, so let's say we do this. We literally don't do anything but call render on the same texture. And that render call should do like some arbitrary shit. We don't really care what, because it should get overwritten by the clear red at the end. Yeah, so literally nothing changes. So the only thing that is causing this problem is by trying to render Cersei Lannister into her own texture. Completely irrelevant. Theoretically. Boom, boom. We need to add her back. Boom, boom. Broken again. So we've bisected the bug, I think, fairly reliably. And the question is just like, why? Why? We should also, maybe when we call this init, can we make sure that we've bound the correct texture? Binding in init this FBO and this texture. Render texture or inner. Okay, then we do the same thing. That val for ID plus 1 should be the culprit, right? That should have no effect on like texture IDs. That should just have effect on object IDs in the texture, but it shouldn't really matter. Yeah, so we have 1651 is related to this texture, 1698. We say, okay, inside we are going to bind frame buffer 1652 with texture 1699. And then later we're like, okay, go back to 16. Dude, I bet you I know what the fuck it is. Maybe I don't. Is it possible that when we call bind frame buffer texture, that the next time we create a texture, that it overrides what was bound here? Do I not understand how to use this correctly? Right, like, because when we go into here, render object texture, this calls this calls GL text image 2D. Oh, hold on. Oh, make texture common. This is where it goes. So we create a new texture. We bind that texture. We bind a new texture. Simple. I wonder if somehow this like texture binding is like overriding the existing frame buffer. I would think that that doesn't happen. That wouldn't make much sense. But I guess it's possible. So what if in here, we make sure to like, like, I don't think this should matter. This would be crazy if this mattered. But just fully unbind this. It's time for RenderDoc. Yeah, everyone says RenderDoc is pretty sick. I've just like never used it. And so every time I'm like, now is the time, but I don't understand. But maybe now is the time. Okay. So that didn't do what I want. Kind of somewhat expectedly. You could also see that it had like some like mega effect on other things. Yeah, you know what? You guys are probably right. How the fuck do you use render doc? It's a good tool to have in the belt, surely. Oh, I've definitely done this before. I assume that it's in the repo somewhere. Um, Render doc getting started. How do I like quick start? Launch app, okay. Then what? Okay. Uh, Capture. Okay, so like render doc command capture. Oh, then he's immediately crashing. So can I like um do I have to wait? Uh Why is this guy immediately being like error no data? I don't really understand. He's trying to load some stuff from the file system and render docs like blocking it or something. Button called key render doc, maybe. Okay, launch application. Executable path. I think this is maybe why we didn't do it last time, is because it stopped. It was not trivial. So we are running this command line arguments. We just huck in. Oh fuck. Uh, this stuff. Actually, maybe we just render with no arguments for now. What happens? Can we reproduce this with no arguments on this? Does that make our lives easier? No, because we need. Hold on, what if we do this? Okay. Is this reproducible with like this? Or we could cause the problem. We could do this, save immediately, load save JSON. No, oh fuck off. Oh, because I can't save anymore, probably because the fucking control S bind probably doesn't work anymore. I bet. Fuck. Okay, so can we like auto expand the globs? Can we do this? Echo. There we go. Then we can copy paste this here. And then can we press play? Launch here? Yeah, so he's mad because maybe is RenderDoc changing the working directory? Yeah, it is. Okay. Launch. Okay, there we go. And then can we do new composition, Cersei, composition IDs? Then here I probably have to type capture. How the fuck? Like, did it work? It says captures collected 0. Why the fuck not? Preview? Like, what's happening here? Why is nothing happening? You can press F12, I think, in here. Tools. Yeah, I don't really understand. Does it like go anywhere? No. Nah, it should be there. Okay. Then we're doing something silly. Render doc. I mean, it's not Vulkan. This is too. Fuck. Render doc not capturing. How do I capture a frame? Open the launch application window. Put this stuff into it. The important thing to know about injecting is that RenderDoc can only inject into processes that have not initialized or used the target API. If the API has already been used or initialized, the results are undefined. Likely, RenderDoc will simply not function. Okay. So he's like injecting himself as OpenGL probably. He's probably hooking LGL. And I wonder if like we are not dynamically linking correctly. It seems pretty dynamically linked. I bet it's some Nix weird list. It seems very likely, right? Nix render doc, Nix OS render doc not capturing. Okay, I mean that's just not Nix OS. Launch. Capture one sequential frames. Capture frames immediately. He says it's connected. He has an active connection. Tools. Feels shit, man. Feels shit. Oi, yoy, yoy. I wish shit worked. I just want to touch a game I didn't know the API of. Yeah, it's probably. I bet there's some sort of like bullshit Nick stuff. That seems pretty likely, huh? Seems pretty likely. All right. Well, I'll look into it off screen because it does seem like a very useful tool. It does seem like a very useful tool, but I'm gonna maybe come back to it because you know it's not working. Okay. So we think for whatever reason, we think that for whatever reason, this call here is overriding the texture that is being used in our frame buffer context, right? I'm pretty sure that's what we think. What if, I just want to make sure I got my scopes right. I'm gonna say like, what if this texture is like invalid by the time it's rendered? But I'm assuming that the call to GL delete textures, I'm assuming that this knows if the texture is being used somewhere else. If it's like been queued as some render command. Right, like we say GL draw arrays here, then we deint the texture, so it should be fine. You still have exit up? Might try that too later if you're hunting for houses. Oh yeah, I guess I am on Wayland right now, which could cause issues. Yeah. It's worth a shot. Worth a shot. Okay. Text unit. He says, let me delete textures. One from this address. Okay. Reasonable. Super reasonable. I want to try leaking stuff, but I know that there's like a large chance that I'll just like fuck my computer up. So I don't want to do that unless it is like a last ditch effort. I would be interested to know. Okay, let's take out this attempt to call into our program. Who gives a shit about that right now? Who gives a shit about that right now? We are trying to debug what we suspect is memory corruption or something. What if we just say, fuck that old frame buffer context. Just before we clear down here, use a completely new one. Does this still, we expect that if that does the right thing, that we will see, even with Cersei Lannister in the composition, we should see a dark red output. Right? So right now, we see dark red. We add her, no longer dark red. So even with a new frame buffer render context using the same output texture, it's totally fucking busted. Which is interesting. So like this thing that happens before, what if we do this like here, like literally down here? Again, I don't think that should matter. But what if this changed behavior? Strangely, that does change behavior. By like a lot. Oh, of course. Of course that changed behavior because we're not rendering to the right spot anymore. Okay, new composition, red. Yeah, very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Now, what happens if we try to do this with a completely new texture? Completely new texture. Fuck the old texture. Let's make a new texture. So we'll bind output text 2 here. And we'll render with output text 2. What's that look like? Okay. Okay, so that's a good clue. That is some form of clue. That, like, we have made some texture, like, it's like this texture is getting corrupted by this call. I don't understand how that could be the case, but it does seem like, and it seems like it gets like corrupted to the point where it feels like it gets corrupted to the point where it's like unrecoverable, right? Like by, if I reuse the same thing here, and I go boom, 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 it's like totally fucking busted. So that kind of makes me think that somebody has rebound the content of this texture. Right? Like here we call GL text image 2D on this stuff. And I guess theoretically, if somebody else called another GL text image 2D somewhere without binding the correct thing, then maybe that would be a problem. Make texture common is called on all of these guys though, and make texture common does in fact bind the new texture. right? He always calls GL bind texture with a new texture. So it seems unlikely that that's the case, unless somebody else is also binding the wrong texture back. So he's called in make texture common. He's also called at apply uniform at location. Okay. That's interesting. So at some point, another texture gets bound somewhere to the GL texture 2D target. Which, I mean, I don't really think that should make a big difference. Because when we say GL text image 2D, we say, let's use the thing that's at the GL texture 2D target. And so, like, after we've bound our frame buffer, that should be fine. The question would be, is somebody modifying our bound texture? And I guess what we can do to test that, as a test, we could, before calling this function that does this stuff, what if we just said like gl bind texture, gl texture 2D, we literally just put texture 0 in here. Say fuck it. Like, if you're gonna fuck something up, don't fuck me up, right? Let's just see what happens if we do that. I don't think, like, I would think that shouldn't matter, but I would think that should work. Okay, so that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change check shit. What if here we also call gl bind frame buffer, frame buffer. How do we? Yeah, we'll also just like clear the current frame buffer. Can we inject known textures at a known stage? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so here, even if we say no fucking frame buffer, no fucking texture, still by the time we get here, output texture has been overwritten with whatever is in here, which is very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Like the only thing that's in my head is that something is reusing something that it shouldn't. Right? But I don't know where that would be. What if we don't do any of this stuff here? At the very least, we don't do. I guess let's see what happens if we apply these viewports and stuff down here before we do the clear at the bottom. Maybe our viewport's null. Maybe when we try to clear here at the end after calling that render call, the viewport's completely fucked. It's a very real possibility, and we should consider that. Yeah, that's not it. And I mean, we did confirm too, I forgot that we did confirm that if we use a new texture here, a completely new texture, and we bind that new texture here and here, everything's happy, which indicates that the viewport is not the problem. Let's just double check that. Yeah, we're back to being a red blob. Okay. Dude, what in the actual fuck is going on? Are there rules about, like, can we not bind the same texture to a frame buffer multiple times? I guess there's like a possibility that that's a problem. Oh, but this frame buffer is dead by the end of that block, so it's okay. Okay, now what happens if I literally comment out all of this shit? Literally nothing. We just construct this texture. We don't do anything with it. We don't fucking touch it until down here, right? Then this guy has no opportunity to be attached to the wrong frame buffer, and like maybe that has some effect in some way. Maybe. Okay, we added Cersei. It's still fucked. It's still fucked. And then just for peace of mind, we move the construction of this texture down here. Okay, so we go down here, boom, boom, boom. Now we're totally fine. So literally all we do is we make a texture up here. We literally do nothing with it, and it's fucking broken after. I guess we should double check here that we do like GL bind texture. Let's fucking rebind this to fucking texture 0. Right? Say like, fuck, get the fuck away from my thing. There's also rules about having texture bound to a frame buffer and a texture unit at the same time, IRC. Ooh, that seems like it could be relevant in some way, shape, or form. So even this, we just create the texture. We literally just create the texture. It's not fucking bound anywhere. Like, all we did is make it exist, and then we come down here and use it, and it's just fucked. Why? Why? Like, we're not doing anything with it. Like, is my understanding of OpenGL just like totally fucked? Where like, here we create a texture, we bind it, we do some stuff, we return it, we do some more stuff, right? And then down here, we're just, we say, okay, now do nothing. Take that away. Like, nobody should even know he exists. And then we fucking use him over here. We're like, okay, now that we're happy with him, like, let's bind ourselves and clear him and then use him. And it's just like, it's just broken. Is it possible? Like, the fact. Okay, I'm just gonna go out on a whim here. Let's go back to the working case. Where we see something that's the color we expect. New composition. It's not what I expected. It's not what I expected at all, actually. What? Hold on. Red? That's interesting. Wait. That's really, really interesting. Why is that changing anything? Hold on a second. GL frame over texture GA. Let's read this a little bit more carefully. So there, I bound, it looks to me, the change that I made there was that after constructing this texture, I said like bind texture 0. Then down here, we call frame buffer render context with that same texture. But all of a sudden, it wasn't doing what we expected anymore, which is good. That's a good sign. What is... So we pass in to this frame buffer texture thing. We say, use this frame buffer with color attachment 0, specifies a 2D texture target, 2D multi-sample texture target, or for cube map textures, which face is to be attached. So this says GL texture 2D. Is that correct? And then this specifies the texture object to attach to the frame buffer attachment point named by attachment. So this is the only thing that I could think that maybe is like leaking out from somewhere else. We're using the bound texture at texture 0. Is this a mistake? Do I not understand this call? GL frame buffer texture 2D. I just want to see, like, I must not understand, like, what is text target here? This must be like where I'm pulling from in texture. Oh, this, okay, wait, let's read all this. Attaches a selected map map level or image of a texture object as one of the logical buffers of the frame buffer currently bound to target. Target must be one of these. Oopsies. Attachment specifies the logical attachment of the buffer. It must be one of these color attachments, stencil attachments, blah, blah, blah. Text target specifies what type of texture is named by texture. Oh, okay. And for cube map texture, it specifies the face to be targeted. If texture is not 0, it must be the name of an existing two-dimensional texture with text target set to GL texture 2D. Okay. If texture is non-zero, the specified level of the texture object named in texture is attached to the frame buffer. I mean, it's so. It feels like if I do this here, which I don't think should have any fucking effect, it feels like it does. Right? Because I called this kind of effectively like here. I said bind texture 0 here. Then I call this thing and say use output texture. In this case, we should see red, but I think we saw black. I think. No, we're seeing red again. I think I did, maybe I did it here. Did I change something in here by mistake? No, this is commented out. I'm pretty sure I saw black somewhere I didn't expect to see black a second ago. Yeah, here. Here, we see black. Which is like, what the fuck? We shouldn't be seeing black. We should be seeing red. And literally the only difference is this line here. Bind texture 2D 0. When again, we think that we're passing in our texture. So really, like the 0 shouldn't matter. It really shouldn't. Unless we're writing something, unless we've written a bug. Back to red. So, what the fuck? Options are maybe like a race condition somewhere. When we generate textures, we bind it to a texture unit. If it's still bound to a texture unit when we band it to a frame buffer, there may be a conflict. When we generate a texture, we bind it to a texture unit. Where texture unit is like GL texture 2D, I assume, right? Texture unit, OpenGL. I assume that's what you mean. I am a human. No, we also have GL active texture. Oh, so I guess like here when we render it, it becomes attached to an active texture unit. Yes. Here, when we call render on this thing. But by this point, it should not be bound to a frame buffer anymore because the frame buffer unbound itself here. I think, because I think when we create our texture, there's no like GL active texture in this loop. This is kind of all of the code we're running. It's bound to a texture target of a texture unit. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're kind of saying that just by having anywhere ever in our code base, anywhere in our code base, we may have called this at some point. We said, okay, let's call GL active texture, which is going to be like texture 0, and we bind some arbitrary texture t to that thing. Uh, uh, sorry, thinking. So active texture 0. My understanding is that this is the part that binds the texture to the active texture. So as long, oh, but this is still active somewhere. So after this call, for the rest of time, anytime we call bind texture, it's getting bound to the active texture. It's getting bound to this texture that was, and so now that is being targeted at 2 places, and that might cause problems. So we might want to somewhere we want to say GL bind texture 0 on this active texture. Hold on, thinking again. You're mostly concerned. I forget what I said. So here we say, okay, active texture 0. This all calls to GL bind texture will attach them to this active texture unit. No good. Which means that like, is there a way to like say GL active texture, like, don't fucking activate a texture anymore? Specifies which texture unit to make active. The number of texture units is implementation dependent, but must be at least 80. The initial value is GL texture 0. And you're saying you can't be bound to a texture unit and frame buffer. Okay. So that kind of implies that I don't understand how it's possible to not be in that case though. Because anytime you bind a texture, he's going to get bound to the texture unit. Unless you just unconditionally on frame buffer construction, unconditionally unbound whoever you were kind of like, you just stick a bind 0 somewhere, like right here. GL texture 2D0, right? You're saying that like this will say some active texture is set. So like this will like deconnect us from that thing before we stick it in here. I think. Which seems kind of reasonable. However, that's kind of exactly what we were trying to get into this broken ass state. Okay. Oh, wait. But also, when we're calling this clear buffer, where does this go again? Oh no, this call goes to GL color buffer 0. So in that case, if that's working now, it might be some bound to some other texture unit as well. I don't know if that would ever be the case. Yeah, I think that we only use active textures. I guess theoretically we could. So maybe I guess that's why you were suggesting doing it on construction, right? You said do it when we make the texture. So kind of like here, you would do this, and then it would be like GL. Yeah. So then, no. Wait, thinking. So at this point, we could only, since we don't touch the active texture anywhere, this is the only place you could be bound to. Okay. I think I'm following, although I don't really know if that's the problem. So here, why are we red again? Why are we black again? Is the question. Because again, all we've done is called bind texture 0 before calling GL frame buffer texture. So I would think that in this case, this shouldn't matter. Now, what if we bound the texture that we're trying to put on the frame buffer? Does that change behavior either? It might. So this makes it red again, and then if we go back in here and we re-enable this thing that breaks us, does it still work? Dark red, add this, dark red. Okay, so what this is indicating, it seems to me like this texture is supposed to be bound here when we call this. Now that doesn't make any fucking sense to me because we specified here. But that did fix our fucking bug. Right? So if we go back to trying to re-enable like everything in the fucking world, just like actually do the things that we were fucking trying to do. Let's not clear this shit anymore. I don't think that's required. So I think that we fixed our bug, theoretically. Maybe. We say add Cersei here. No, we're back. Fuck. I got a little bit too excited. A little too excited. Putting explicitly the situation I warned about fix it, that's concerning. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Just for the record. Let's get back into the case where things were working the way we expected. New composition, add Cersei. We're dark red now. Yeah, so that was done in this case where we had exactly this. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So something is wrong. It's obvious that something is wrong. I just can't find it. I can't find it. Is it possible that when we delete and unbind this frame buffer, like, do we have to remove its attachments first? Frame buffer texture. Like, I just don't even know. What's the crazy part to me? The crazy part to me is that binding, like, this texture is somehow getting in a state completely unrelated to this. Like, how do I say this? I say bind texture 0. Literally nobody touched that texture. Like, how is that getting hit? It's literally like make texture, unbind him from everything. Unbind him from the fucking world. How is any downstream code changing that? I mean, we did comment about bitmap generation. I don't think that should matter. I guess, like, we do have, like, bitmap parameters. If say we are sampling at, like, bitmap level 2, and bitmap level 2 hasn't been generated for our texture, does that matter? I mean, zooming in doesn't seem to change anything. Zooming out doesn't seem to change anything. So, like, that doesn't seem like it. Very strange. Very, very, very strange. Dude, fucking OpenGL, man. I feel like this should be so straightforward. It feels like it should be so simple. And we've never had a problem like this before. That does sound like it would be a problem. Yeah, but then when we turn this back on, I think that we were having like errors about bitmaps not generating for like the right thing. Yeah, here we can't generate bitmaps for R32i. Right? So like it made sense to turn this off. What if we did if format is not equal to R32i, we leave this code on. Just in case. Storage format, I mean. No field R32i. Oh, RI32, my bad. We can set the number of MIPS to 1 so we don't have to think about them. Okay, that's useful info. So instead of doing this, we can do like GL text GL text parameter I. Can we like GL text parameter number of map levels? Levels? Max level probably? Sets the index of the highest defined map level. So we set this to 1. GL texture max level 0 seems pretty reasonable. I mean, we can also see if that just like fucks up everything else in their code base. If it doesn't, then we're pretty chilling probably. Right, like if we do like new composition, we add some stuff in here. Like the fact that this is working at all kind of indicates that, oh, this isn't using any like texturing though. What if we, I think if we use a shader, it does. Yeah, I think that's fine. And then maybe we need to like double shader it. So we go like, seems fine. Seems fine. Now we wanted to test if that has any effect on our composition ID stuff. So interestingly, this is black when there's nothing. And it changes color when we add stuff, right? And I'm assuming, does that behavior change if we throw the texture generation after all of the other like the rendering of like the components of the composition? So now it's just 0 unconditionally. Let's make sure that we... Yeah, I mean, it really seems like this is the problem, right? I turn this off. I hit new composition, we're back to red. So why is it that the bound texture at the time of frame buffer context initialization has any effect whatsoever? That's the question we have to answer ourselves. I would think this has no effect. So maybe we can ask one of these idiots on the internet. So we can say, does the correct texture have to be bound at the time of calling GL frame buffer texture 2D? He says yes. The specifies the texture attachment needs to be at this place. The texture that is to be attached must be bound to the target the time function is called. Why do we pass it in then? Question mark. The function still needs the actual texture object ID to specify which textures to attach. I mean, we could also double check this by reading the docs to GL frame buffer texture 2D. He attaches a selected bitmap over an image of a texture object as one of the logical buffers of the frame buffer object currently bound to target, where target is GL frame buffer. Attachment specifies the logical attachment of the frame buffer. It must be color attachment, depth attachment, stencil, blah, blah, blah. Attaching a level of texture to this is equivalent to attaching a level of both, blah, blah, blah. Okay, not really that interesting. Target specifies which type of texture is named by texture. Yes. For cube mount texture, specifies the face to be attached. If texture is not 0, it must be the name of an existing 2-dimensional texture with text target set to this. Okay. Or an existing 2-dimensional multi-sample texture, which is not. Okay. So we're in this case. Hello, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. If texture is non-zero, the specified level of the texture named texture is attached to the frame buffer attachment point named by attachment. If text target is one of these. So nowhere in here do I see anything about the fact that it has to be bound. I don't see, to the currently bound frame buffer object. Yeah, nothing in here indicates to me that the bound texture has any effect, but we're clearly seeing that it does. Like, so blatantly seeing that. And why? Why? Can we look up, like, frame buffer rendering? Frame buffer render to texture OpenGL. Right, so this guy says, create the render target. We bind a frame buffer. Okay, we generate a texture. Bind the texture. We set his initial data. And then turn on this shit. Sure, whatever. Then we create a text buffer or a depth buffer, which we are not using, so we can ignore that part. And then he's like, okay, we GL frame buffer texture. Color attachment 0. Whoa. That's different than what I wrote. What's the difference between GL frame buffer texture and GL frame buffer texture 2D? Okay. What if we just didn't use 2D here? Because what is it? Okay, named frame buffer texture has 4 parameters. What is the difference here? The frame buffer object that is bound to target is equivalent to GL draw frame buffer. Oh, I see. So the named version is not specifying the bound texture, but the bound frame buffer. I see. For 1D, 2D, and 3D, this specifies which type of target texture is named by texture. Why do we need that then? It seems like it shouldn't fucking matter. I mean, we could try it. I don't really see a reason not to try this. So he says do this shit instead. Now it's red. And we say now bind 0. Will it still be red? That's the question. No. No. I just feel like nothing indicates that it matters, man. Yeah, I don't see it. Can we look up, like, exactly this? GL frame buffer texture using bound texture instead of specified. I wonder if this is like a bug in my OpenGL driver or something. Yeah, I just don't see another way this could, unless GL clear buffer IV is not doing what I think. Clear individual buffers of frame buffer. Yeah, I mean, what else could it be doing? Like, what the fuck else could it be doing? Okay. Maybe we can ask like, can I talk to someone who's not, can we ask ChatGPT? When I call, let's take out the Zigness from this. So this, take this away, this away, this away. You know, this, okay. Followed by a GL clear. The behavior seems to be completely different depending on if, depending on what texture was bound to GL texture 2D. Is that what I'm fucking binding? Is that what I'm binding here? Yeah. Before the call. Before the construction, before setting up my frame buffer. Why? When you call this, you're attaching texture to frame buffer. The parameters you pass this function specify which frame buffer and attachment weight, which texture to attach. Blah blah blah. Here are a few key points. Before you call this, does not directly affect frame buffer setup. That's what I thought. However, using a texture that has not been properly set up, it can lead to undefined behavior. Okay, that seems likely. We are checking the frame buffer completeness. Format and parameters of the texture can affect how rendering works. For example, the texture has a different internal format than the frame buffer expects. It can lead to issues. Make sure that the texture format matches the expect. Oh, okay. Does color attachment 0? Is he mad about integer attachments? I wonder. Seems possible. If you are using multiple texture units, ensure that you are binding the correct texture to the texture unit before calling. The active texture unit can be changed using GL active texture, and the texture bound to that will be the one used in subsequent operations. But we, like, frame buffer and texture units are completely unrelated, I would have thought. Okay, but I mean, the thing about GL color attachment 0 is maybe interesting. Are we allowed to use, like, OpenGL frame buffer integer buffer? Is that legal and allowed? Okay, so he initializes some things. He has an object ID texture, which he says use GL red. That seems wrong to me. My understanding is that here he should be using some sort of integer format. Let's see if the people. Okay, so this guy says the same thing. This is maybe interesting here. Oh, but that I think we've already done that. We made that same change where when we create the texture, we do in fact say if, yeah, we do use red integer there, so we're doing what he said. Dude, I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind. I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind. Texture attachments, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, it really does not feel like. Target, attachment, text target. Yeah, we're not doing anything crazy. Not gonna lie, I'd already had a search with Jippity on that before you did. It really feels like I'm not doing anything wrong. Technically using GL red integer, GL inside byte, not GL red integer, GL int. I thought that was allowed, but not at this point. Yeah, might as well just huck anything at the wall, right? We should double check this. GL text image 2D. I do agree. At this point, whatever. Type. The following things are accepted. Blah blah blah. And then do we? I guess we'll just write GL in here, which is what we wrote. Okay. I mean, I doubt that'll have any effect. But you are right. At this point, we fucking throw anything at the wall. So this is black still. And again, the thing that we think is making it black is this. So can we also, like, I just want to, like, really reduce the amount of things that could be going wrong here. So on render, we are literally rendering only one thing, which is our composition object. Okay. So we have, yeah, that seems pretty fine. So we just create our texture, bind texture 0, set up our render context, viewport, and scissor, clear, render that texture with our default renderer. By the way, integer textures should be allowed as frame buffer attachments. Yeah, that was my understanding as well, but I will click the link. Okay, these formats are required for both textures and render buffers. Any of the compositions presented in each row is a required format. So we have red signed 32. Okay. Seems fine. So again, we go in here, and that's all we're doing. So we fucking unused capture. Fine, fine, we'll delete that too. Dude, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. I'm actually gonna lose my mind. Black. And just again, just to, like, for my own fucking sanity, we uncomment out this bind texture, which should have no effect because literally no one should be using him anymore. Red. Okay. So, there are two places to bisect. Let's confirm if we were to do this after, put GL bind texture 0 here, after we clear this thing, maybe we've misattributed where that thing is changing behavior. Right? Maybe. It's a possibility. And we should account for that. That is a big fucking unlock. This is a huge fucking unlock. So here, we clear the output texture, we make it red, and then here, something's going wrong. That is a huge fucking clue. Absolutely mega big, mega clue. Okay, so what if how would that have an effect? If this chunk of code is not doing what we expect. So the display ID program on render is not applying the texture. If that is the case, if that's the case, if this is not running, which is a possibility, right? So, hi mom, I'm on TV. Let's see if this is happening. Okay, so he's going crazy. He's going crazy. He's saying, "Hey mom, I'm on TV" over and over again. So this thing is happening, and can we check maybe what texture he is trying to bind? Right? So he is trying to bind T to active texture. Let's log both. Okay. So he's trying to bind to some texture unit this texture. And then here, can we also, before doing that, say std debug print output text is this texture. What's he pissed about? Probably one of those other logs. Oops. Okay. New composition. Interesting. Unconditionally 5. But we have output text of 1769. We are never seeing this logged with the right number. Which means the reserved uniforms. By the way, is text unit alloc next doing any reuse or a finite smallest number of them? That's definitely a possibility. But based off these logs, I think it's more likely that our display ID program has not correctly parsed its inputs. Oh my fucking god! I know what it is. Oh my god, I bet you I know what it is. When we walk our program to find its uniforms, we go on initialization. We say, could you get me the uniform list with these reserved items, right? These reserved items, one of which is going to be called image, input image. We're going to say, if this is a reserved item, here is our thing. And this comes from our uniform iterator. The uniform iterator says, give me a list of all the fucking uniforms that you have. And one of the things he does, he says, sampler 2Ds are images. I fucking bet you there's going to be some sort of like sampler U sampler. Like, dude, I fucking bet you that's it. Okay, what we should do is we should fucking crash if this thing is not fucking hit. But before the god damn it, god, it's okay. Everything's okay. Here it is. Here it is. I bet you that was the fucking bug the whole fucking time. Is that we were not correctly resolving types here. Which means that in the case, like, we need to fucking crash on that or something. Right? Like, we need to check if we didn't find all the uniforms. We're just not fucking binding the uniform, and then we just happen to have active texture unit 0 set, and then we were binding textures to active texture 0, and then 0 was the default one probably, and so it just happened to be getting propagated. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not upset. I'm not upset. So now we go back to enabling all this code. On the bright side, like, now at least everything makes sense. Nothing is like crazy fucked, which is actually super cool. Like, that's actually super cool. So let's try to go. What was the actual code line fix? Let's see if we can find it. I think it was in plain render program. Dude, it's like deep. It's deep in our fucking abstractions. Abstractions kill us. Get uniform list. Here we went into program uniform iterator. So it was here when we say, hey, as we are walking get active uniform, we say, what type is this thing? And the fix was this, where we were not correctly identifying a unsigned int sampler as an image. And so when we were saying, please set this image to this value, we like hadn't figured out where that image was, like which uniform index that thing was. And our code was just like too stupid to be like, wait a second, we don't have that one. Maybe not too stupid because like OpenGL like compiles that stuff out, like the GLSL compiler compiles it out. So there are valid cases where we're like, if you have this thing, could you set it please? But if it's not there, that's totally okay. So I'm not really sure if this is like a problem. Obviously, you put two cases on the same line. Thanks. No worries. No worries. Oh, that's so frustrating. That's so I fucking it's fine. So now, after all that, as null and implemented. But the problem is that there are cases where that's okay as well, I think. Maybe not anymore. There used to be cases where there were things in our shaders that we don't like a mat 4x4. We don't support mat 4x4s right now, which is maybe a bug. Right? Maybe we should make sure that every single thing that we might want to feed to a shader goes through that API. But yeah, that's fucking it. We were stupid. Okay. So now let's go like this. And then I believe at this point we should be seeing the same thing. So we go here, still red. Very good. Very good. Now let's just delete this clear. Delete this clear. Come back. I think the thing that threw me was that I was so confident that the thing that was getting set, the problem, I was so confident that the problem was related to the binding of the frame buffer, not the display at the end. Okay, so now we need to uncomment this stuff as well. Forgot this one. Did that build? Did I save? No, I didn't. That's why. Oh, lordy, lordy, lord. Okay. Add, Cersei, go here. So now this is fully black, but maybe that's more reasonable. Maybe. So we now supposedly, our comp ID program is supposed to do what now? He's literally just putting the number 1 out. And then our display thing is rendering the color. Right. So here, if we say, show me if the color is greater than 0, instead of what we were doing before, hopefully we start to see something that looks a little sane. Please. Please. Oh, let's fucking go! I know, it's stupid, it doesn't fucking matter, but we finally got there. Okay. God fucking damn it. God damn it. But we finally got there. We finally got there. We now have correctly masked that shit off. T-Bob, thanks for the gifted sub to RC Arson. Much appreciated. That's pretty sick. I mean, this should have been like nothing. Like all of this should have just worked. But instead it took what 3.5 hours. But sometimes that's the way it goes, and it feels so good when you finally find the fucking bug. And it really, really, really fucking indicates that we should have better testing on our end. I don't really know where that needs to go, but we should at the very least flag that that is a problem that can happen. Oh, god damn, dude. So I think the fix here is that we should just make sure that everything goes through this class, and then it won't be a problem anymore. Then we can like assert. Fix me. This is a large bug potential. If the uniform we expect to set is not present, this will hide or is not an expected type. Not a converted type. We will silently discard any sets which can result in very confusing external behavior. All right. I mean, that's got to be the stream. We can't keep going after that. But I'm just very happy that we finally got to the point where we have integer textures working. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope that I understand that it was probably hard to follow a lot of this because I was lost as fuck. But if you liked what you saw, we stream most days at around 12:30 Pacific time to 4 o'clock Pacific time. It is 5:30 Pacific time now, so you should expect us to see us online anywhere between 5 hours ago and an hour and a half ago. Um, if you want to keep up with our projects, but you can't always catch us live, there's a YouTube link in the Twitch description. We have our projects organized into playlists. We've been kind of working on this like code map visualization. Today's topic was the image manipulation program. We kind of flip flop between them. I will probably do another stream on this stuff. I would have expected that the rest of this would go very smoothly, but I also thought that the whole feature would be done in like an hour and a half. So maybe we'll find some more exciting bugs along the way. Yeah, I think that's all I really want to talk about. Thank you for watching, guys. YouTube, peace out, and Twitch, let's find someone to raid.